Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to see you again and great to be back doing Claris Community Live after our December holiday break. Um, please join us in completing our poll, which I am trying to get started, by clicking on the apps button in the lower right and answering our questions. And our first question this morning is, what's your Claris-related New Year's resolution? And so as we do our panel introductions, I think we're all going to answer that question. So to start, I'm Rosemary Tigi, Community Engagement Manager at Claris and host for the Community Live series. And my Claris-related resolution is to build two apps this year. One professional, and I don't know yet if I'm going to use FileMaker or Claris Studio for it. And one personal. As many of you probably know, I have a yarn inventory database to support my crazy fiber arts habits, and I'd like to expand that and add on a new project tracking database so I can keep better track of the projects I make and pictures and what I used and what I did. So Martha, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. So I'm excited to be here. I'm the manager of community and learning at Claris as of last month. So I'm excited to start this new adventure. My New Year's resolution, gosh, I have so many since I just started. I am so excited to just hear more stories and from the community and just really get into the power of what the Claris platform has done for so many businesses and just how much developers love to build in it. So I just can't wait to hear your stories. So I'm going to be as available as possible to chat about those and hear more. Rick, you want to go next?
Sure. I've been around long enough that I don't now do New Year's resolutions because you know how long they last into February. However, if I were to think about that, probably what I'd say is, since my job as an evangelist, that I just continually get better and better at articulating the value of what it is we're doing here and why you benefit from it. And I have a lot of opportunities to do that, and I just want to get a lot better at it. So that's it. Doug.
What about you, Doug?
So morning. So my name's Doug Wallis. For those who don't know me, I'm actually French. I'm on the west side of Europe, so this side for you. I don't know, this side for you. Been doing FileMaker like we were talking before with FileMaker since 1997, which is a long time. If there was one thing in FileMaker I would like to get is I think design is one thing that I've noticed over the years is one thing that I kind of gave up on really sort of doing it properly. And I was looking at some of like the content that we have from Claris partners before Christmas. There was some really nice design. I'm like, maybe go back into doing some nice design in FileMaker. Not what related. I think do a bit more sport. I'm trying to be too much lazy. Stuck in front of my laptops every day. So bit more sport.
Oh, I think we can all appreciate that. And so today, Rick and Doug are here to share the latest FileMaker updates. We released FileMaker Pro and Go updates in mid-November and FileMaker Server in mid-December, right before the holiday break. And then also talk a little bit, give some previews to what we're thinking to bring remote backup to FileMaker. And so before we get started, let me just share our polls. So for resolutions, we have a little word cloud. It looks like AI is the winner. Also learning, integration, continuing to work on FileMaker. A few other things. And then our second question of what version of FileMaker are you currently using? 80% are using FileMaker 2025 or FileMaker version 22. But a little less than half have FileMaker 2024 in production, 22% 2023, and a third 19 or earlier. So yes, I know that adds up to more than 100 because we let people pick all the options that they are currently using. And so Rick, why don't you take it away?
Well, I'm not sure. Okay, so what we're going to do here, just so that you have an idea, is that I'm going to do a high level sort of, these are the things I think in the 22.0.4 update in the products are worth calling out. So using an American football analogy, I'll do the play-by-play, and then Rosemary, Doug, and Martha can add any color commentary. We'll just go through. And then as Rosemary said, once we get through what we did in these updates, then we'll give a preview of something we're working on and you've probably heard about. And so we want to talk about that as well. So at a very high level, the updates involved FileMaker Server, FileMaker Pro, and FileMaker Go, as Rosemary said. They came out with Pro and Go coming in November, and then Server followed a few weeks later in December. And probably the key enhancements across all of these are, we got the latest Mac OS, iOS, and iPad OS compatibility. There are some security and some framework updates to keep up with, making sure that our systems are secure. There's a few integration enhancements, a few user experience enhancements, as well as developer enhancements. And so the statement I would make is this isn't about flashy new features. It's about earning and preserving the trust of the customers and the developers that use our product to run their business or make their living. It's staying current with Mac OS releases, which is table stakes, obviously, and especially how fast customers move with those operating systems. And then has some significant upgrades to the infrastructure like OpenSSL and Tomcat, which directly reduces risk and as we continue to keep up with what's being supported and being actively patched. So I'm going to walk through, as I said, and this is not meant for you to read. I know it's an eye chart, but I want to use it to call out some of the things that stand out for me. And of course, you can always go to the release notes and that sort of thing and get more detail. But for FileMaker Pro, it's the support for Mac OS 26. And there were some issues before we did the release in compatibility that, for the most part, have been knocked down. We do have, and we'll show a screenshot, and I've got a blog for this. We have made some enhancements to the privilege set dialog that allows more granularity and to take people who don't have full admin access, but give them the ability to manage database or manage custom menus. I think, technically this was possible already in the product, but you had to go to different places and know different things. And now it's pretty straightforward. So security is becoming more granular and more practical. There were some issues with PDF rendering in FileMaker 22 or version 2025, like not being able to display the euro symbol, or the output didn't have the appearance that was intended. So that was addressed. And then there was an issue if you're doing silent updates. If you're deploying FileMaker out to the desktops, that would fail, and so it was really impacting that. So before I go on to the next set of things that we did still in FileMaker Pro, anything to say about any of these on the slide, Doug or Rosemary or Martha?
So there was one that I had there was an issue that we had for FileMaker Pro on Windows. Sorry, I'm not a big Windows user, as anyone at Apple. But there was an issue that we had, and we kind of fixed in the 2002 and now this release to make it easier for people to be able to keep two versions of FileMaker Pro on Windows. So whether you had 21 or 22. There was one thing, so I'm just going to share my screen just to show you how it works on Windows 11. Because there was some confusion, I think, that I saw on the community and from people of how do you make sure you keep two versions of Windows running on your machine. So I'm just going to grab. Why is WebEx doing updates when you don't want them?
Because we're presenting live.
And while Doug does that, I'll just call out, please, if you have questions or want Doug and Rick to go deeper, feel free to drop questions in chat make sure you send it to everybody, and I will ask them when they have a break.
Hang on a sec. I might have to quit and reopen. Why is that doing that?
Hey, Doug, while you're doing that, let me go
Yeah.
on to that because I still have a couple more pro slides, so we can
Okay,
pick
go
up
ahead. Yeah.
on that.
Let's
So,
just do that.
and these are more bug fixes. If you're using Windows, speaking of Windows, the display of the measurement units wasn't coming through, so that's been resolved in the latest update. There's been a fix to SQL cross joins in the product where we're getting incorrect results. This just addresses that so that obviously it makes sense is what you think you're talking to is what you're actually talking to. There are a few script step fixes. There was an issue with under some circumstances go to list a record script step that was set to go to the current record or layout was actually going to a different layout, obviously not good. And then an issue with the verify SSL certificate, if it was enabled and the insert URL would fail if there was a parameter at the end of that. So that was addressed. There were a few issues with Mac OS Tahoe and keyboard shortcuts and system dialog for pop-up menus, such as when you're exporting records to the file dialog, that it was being enlarged. And then sort of what Doug was talking about, another piece of it is on Windows, if FileMaker Pro had previously been updated, running the updater for the latest version would try to install the wrong version. It would prevent a successful update. So, and then if I think Doug can share now, but what I'd like to say is many of the fixes that we're talking about in this update 22.0.4 are designed to eliminate some of the edge case failures, some of the bug fixes we're talking about now, which, as developers working with customers who end up seeing the impact of these, it goes directly to your reputation. You always want to keep customers happy. And, these are the kinds of fixes that users don't notice in their absence other than there's not something coming up, but developers build this every single day. So Doug, are you able to share now?
Yeah, I'm hoping that it will. Yeah, it's working. Cool. So let me share the screen. So in Windows 11, if you're doing an update of FileMaker Pro, you have a couple of options. So you can go into Help, and then you go Check for Updates, and it's going to basically give you this menu. So if you're running FileMaker 21, it gives you the option to be able to migrate directly to FileMaker 22. And the problem is some people want to keep a version of 21 and 22 on the machine. So if I run the update from here, it basically just keeps one version of FileMaker Pro on my machine. And so 21 is being removed and replaced by 22. So if you want to keep two versions, you have to do it through the updater. So if you go to the claris.com resources page, you'll see there's a update and download page. And from there, you can actually grab the FileMaker Pro 22.0.4 updater. So this is not the full installer FileMaker, it is just the updater. But by using this updater, you have the option to keep the two versions running on your machine. When you're doing it, be careful because the system that we use for the updater on Windows doesn't really give you that many options. So when you click on update, it's going to basically look at your FileMaker Pro. There's a couple of options that it's going to ask you. And then you're going to have two options. You're going to have the option to keep the plus version of FileMaker Pro on your machine, so FileMaker 21, and install FileMaker 22, or remove FileMaker 21 and only have FileMaker 22 running on that. There's no cancel button, so if you don't want to do it, click on the cross and it's going to basically close it. But once you make the option, you're going to choose. So the idea is for me to keep basically the previous version. When I click on yes, it's basically doing a copy of FileMaker Pro, creating a new folder, and then uploading the update version of FileMaker Pro 22. So at the end of it, your process is actually quite quick, and you end up with two versions. So the FileMaker Pro that you had before is actually a new version, and then you're going to get a FileMaker Pro 21.1.3 that's basically going to be kept in memory. If you look in your program files, you'll see that on the FileMaker, you have now two options to be able to actually sort of keep those two. If you want to run like older versions of FileMaker, like 19, I think just rename basically the folder. There's a couple of stuff maybe sometimes you'll need to actually do in your Windows registry, but at least you'll be fine. As an update as well, the 22 FileMaker Pro 22 doesn't support anymore Windows 10 because Windows 10 is out of support from Microsoft. So if you want to use Windows 10 still you'll still have to use older version of FileMaker. But if I double click on that now, hopefully it will open FileMaker Pro 22. So that is the one way to be able to keep two versions running at the same time. So this is 21. If I go to help, oops, no, wrong button. Click on this one. So this is my 22 running, and if I click on this one, you will get my 21 running. So that way you can actually have the two systems running at the same time and be able to make sure that everything you've actually built on 21 works properly for you on 22.
And a couple questions about that. Can you install FileMaker 21 after you've installed FileMaker 22?
I'm pretty sure you won't be able to do so. The best way is to reinstall everything, takes a couple of seconds, and then reinstall 21, and then do the update, and so that way you can have 21 and 22 working properly together. Okay. Again, multiple versions. You probably you can get 21, 22. I haven't tested with 20 basically on the same system, and 19, but there might be ways around it. I think it's the Windows registry that could actually be causing issues, so maybe not the same.
Nope.
For the Mac, it's really different because on the Mac you just need to actually rename your FileMaker Pro to whatever you want it to be, and then you can have 20. I mean, you could have all the options running, or the version of FileMaker running on your system. So it's a lot easier on the Mac because of how everything is done. But they'll share the preference file, the list of preferences that you have in your FileMaker across multiple copies.
Yep, I'll just add, someone just said in chat that no issues with older versions.
Okay.
Could always, like nothing has changed for the older versions on Windows. The only changes in 21 and 22. So like the processes you used in the past to have multiple versions on Windows work for FileMaker 20 and earlier.
Yeah. So the only reason we actually sort of giving you this option is like the versions, but the one thing we try, and I know people find it kind of boring, but we like boring stuff. There's a lot of security features or stuff that we actually updated, like Tomcat and OpenSSL on the server, and we're doing the same basically on the Pro. There's a lot of issues with third-party tools that we use because they're just being used across so many products. There's more hackers trying to actually sort of get into them. So whilst in some occasion it's good to actually stay on older version, there's going to be a lot more sort of people trying to actually get into your system if you have outdated version of FileMaker. So especially like if using WebDAG and stuff like that, it will be time to actually move to latest version.
Yeah, and there's one more question. Where can you find installers, the full installers for previous versions?
So I'll share, actually, just me go to there. So there is a FileMaker, just type it correctly, FileMaker redirects. So this is a stuff that most people don't know about. We don't like really sort of sharing it, but in the mindset of being nice, let me share it. We have an index of FileMaker installer for every file that we have, which is available to actually sort of on the internet. So when you go to the release page, we only show the latest one, but it's been fed from an XML file. So this is the address basically of that file. So filemaker.com/redirect/ss.txt, and that will give you basically all the link to all the installers of the trial version, but the trial version of FileMaker and the full version are exactly the same stuff since FileMaker 10 all the way down to 22. So it's kind of a long list, but actually the reason you have so many entries is we give you the language reference, the all the same installer, depending on if you want to create your own systems, that's where you can get them. So if you're looking for the FileMaker Pro 20 installer, you can actually find it there. And because it's XML, you could actually keep that file updated whenever there's an update, and that's where you'll be able to actually get it from. This is being kept updated by us. So whenever there is a new version that comes out, we update it from here. So if we have a new version of 22 that comes out, we updated that link. So if you want to keep every version of FileMaker, you have to actually maybe create a connector in Claris Connect to be able to actually keep everything. But anyways, there'll be just one version of the latest version of everything.
And one more question about, is it possible to get older versions of FileMaker Go? No.
So the only way you can do them is if you've actually they are in your Apple account download file. So if you've done it in the past, you can get it back, but otherwise they go away. So if you're looking to get like a FileMaker Go 19, if you've never got it on your account, you wouldn't be able to actually sort of get it nowadays because that version is out of support, and because of the Apple App Store Connect rules, if it's out of support, basically is you can't offer it to new customers, but all customers can still actually get access to it.
And before I go on to the next product and the update, I did want to show a screenshot of the enhanced privilege set dialog. And in that red rectangle are the two options that we added to give more, granular control to people that you want to not give them full admin access, but you want them to do certain things. And we have an accompanied blog. If you go to our resources and engineering blogs, you'll see a document here about this enhancement that we made. So I just want to call that, and I think Rosemary will put that if she hasn't already in a link. So what did we do to FileMaker Go? If you're deployed, you're using Go in the field, well, of course, we have the latest operating system, iOS and iPad OS support. One of the things to know with this update that came out in late November for FileMaker Go, it addressed an issue where Go was crashing if you were printing via AirPrint. And so that has been addressed. And we had some customers that were impacted by that, that we wanted to make sure that we address. There's also now a mandatory FileMaker extension for the FMP protocol, and that's just to make sure that as your deployments are working across, Pro and Go and other places, that it's doing exactly what it is you think it's doing when it's executing. And by having that extension, it makes it a little bit more predictable. There was a fix for the web viewer script step where essentially set web viewer to URL was resulting in a blank page. Well, that functionality is restored back to what it was before. And then there was some issue on FileMaker Go in preserving the transparency of PNG images, and that's been addressed. So I wanted to call out the few things that we did in FileMaker Go to continue to support. Anything, Doug or Rosemary, to say in addition about any of this?
No.
No.
Okay. Going on to server, the theme, right? Support for macOS Tahoe, a couple of updates. OpenSSL has been upgraded to 3.5 LTS, and its long-term support extends out to April 30th, and that's just a security enhancement. There's been upgrade to the Tomcat version. You can see here there were some vulnerabilities in the previous ones, but with Tomcat and some of these other frameworks, people are constantly trying to hack them. So it's sort of a whack-a-mole game as we'll just continue as we hear of issues like CVEs and that sort of stuff to push out these in updates as soon as we can. There have been some enhancements to OData, primarily to continue to improve the integration between FileMaker, Claris Studio, and Claris Connect. But behind the scenes, it's also leveraging webhooks, and we're progressively enabling more and more use of that outside of the specific use. And there's been a lot of excitement about that. Probably in the future, we'll do a community live on what you can already do with webhooks and what you're going to be able to do. And then couple other bug fixes. There was a crash in the WebDirect or custom web publishing when using text generation with streaming, some of our AI stuff. And then there was a non-functional calendar icon for WebDirect on mobile devices, and we addressed that. And then, just the statement that server continues to be the backbone of all serious deployments. I mean, the day of I'll just use FileMaker and peer-to-peer. Some people still do that, but if you got a serious deployment, you got server, and we continue just to address compatibility and security. Doug or Rosemary, anything additional to say here?
The one thing is the data stuff. So I think we had community live session in the past when we it is one of the thing where there's a lot of the high drive within Claris from the engineer side to actually make sure that it's using the full protocol of the latest version. And we're going to basically use it a lot more. I mean, like Rick was saying, there's a lot of stuff we do with Claris Studio. We released recently the MCP server for Claris. That's going to leverage a lot of the things on the data. I think we have a Claris community live in about 2 weeks' time on MCP. So it's a lot of the work that we're doing is going to be on that front, because it's really important for us to start getting people to, if they haven't started learning it, to actually learn it now, because in the future it's going to replace like ODBC and a lot of other things that we're doing. On top of that, we are investing a lot more now on the OData API versus the data API, because we can do more things with the data. And our data API was done the FileMaker way. It has some strangeness in it that we know are kind of weird for sometimes for people to use. And there's a lot more people that will leverage your data than the data API on the long term. So it's why we're doing all this sort of this work. But if you haven't tried webhooks, you can do some really cool stuff. And if you use Studio, you'll see how it works. But it's one of the things that will be cool to pick up.
Do have a couple questions that came in. First, around FileMaker Go. I think this is related to the FMP URL protocol. So does that mean, so first to clarify, you need to include .fmp12 when you're naming a file in the FMP URL?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. And then does that imply that there's no plan to change the file extension anytime soon?
It's not something, I mean, we change it if we have to. We don't change it because it can be disruptive. We don't have to. Typically, the reason we change the protocol is that it prevents us from implementing something because the file format doesn't support it. And so there's nothing on the horizon. We haven't done one for a while, but I think it'll be FMP12 for the next while. I haven't seen anything otherwise, but yeah.
And then a question about those developer security updates. And I don't know if you can answer this or if this is something we should take back to product and engineering. Why does the security update designed for developer access not allow using the data viewer? That's limiting for devs doing their day-to-day activities.
It's so this new developer privilege is a V1. I think it's essentially to do with some security stuff that we had inside it, and we kind of had to actually sort of put it in that version so that people would actually be able to see it. On the blog itself, we've basically given out what it will allow you to do versus what it can't do. So I'm hoping that by the next update, we'll be able to actually increase the amount of stuff that you have control over, like the data viewer and some of the other options. So.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right.
And I think the last question I see is about FileMaker Server for Linux, fixing and closing all the files whenever Ubuntu checks for updates. I think in chat, we've had the answer that it's not fixed, but thank you, Matt, for sharing a workaround or a fix. And we'll take the feedback back to product that this is a problem.
All right, so in summary for the updates before we go into the preview is that applying the 22.0.4 update that we just talked about helps developers and partners. You look professional to your customers because you're constantly increasing the compatibility, the security, knocking down some of the bugs as well. So and then our call to action is if at all possible, if you want our most secure, most reliable, most performant version of our products, because every single time we do release, behind the scenes, there are hundreds of things that go in there. So it's always our latest and greatest. We know that not always everyone can, update at the speed that that you may like, and there's various reasons for that. But we highly encourage you to do that. And now we're going to pivot into something that we've talked about towards the end of the year. We wanted to sort of update you on it, and that is Claris FileMaker Remote Backup. And so we are currently working on this and to talk about what it is, and then we'll run you through a number of screenshots of the current UI, but as we bring this to production, some of that may change to make sure that it's rock solid. Is essentially we're going to add an option to the platform that will allow you to leverage the internal FileMaker server or FileMaker cloud backup mechanism to be able to send a copy of your backups to the cloud, essentially AWS storage, leveraging exactly the same system that we use for FileMaker Cloud, backed by the same Apple team that backs FileMaker Cloud. And so essentially, you can back up from FileMaker Server and take that data and store it in the cloud. And it works automatically backing up. So once you set up the schedule, it just runs. It does the incremental backups. You can use it also to move files from one server to the other. So it makes an easy option for server migration. And it's very straightforward. We'll show you as we go in the screenshots. How easy it is to set up. Some of the key benefits is, it simplifies backup management, and a number of people have already solved their own issues, and maybe they have a script running that throws stuff in Dropbox or Box or something like that. This is integrated directly into the platform. It is administered through the customer console and then set up via the FileMaker admin console on server. And essentially, it is part of the bigger picture of disaster recovery and business continuity, and part of the overall strategy there. So you've got your normal scheduled FileMaker server backups. You have a routine database verification of the backups, because we've all heard stories of people that have backups, but all of the backups they have were corrupted because somewhere along the way that happened. So that's part of making sure that you're verifying the backups that you have are good. Then you have the secondary drive backups in case the server fails, and then offsite backups in case the building burns down, right? That kind of a thing. So it's a many layered thing, and I believe there was a community live with Limited Court and others that I think Rosemary has the link for, where they talked about this concept of disaster cover and business continuity. And there are other things that we're doing. The next major release, you'll see us continually going down this path of making sure that if something goes wrong, you can easily recover from that. And then the statement I like to say is like, it's not that if something goes wrong, it's how quickly you can recover when something goes wrong, right? And so sort of the way to think about it. We'll go through this because it's easier to show in pictures, but where the initial setup takes place through the Claris customer console, and then using the server admin console to essentially bind those things together, and it takes advantage of incremental backups so that they're more efficient. And as I said before, You can copy from on-premise to the cloud, for instance, as another sort of side effect there. And we already talked about this, so I won't go into that, but there's some of the common use cases, disaster recovery, some compliance requirements depending upon the kind of organization you're in, and long-term data archiving. It helps with that, and then with multi-site deployments, you can have various locations centralized. You can in this, and Doug will talk about this in a second, where you can only have one remote backup per server, but your remote backup can talk to multiple servers. So it's got some flexibility there. And so let's take a look. And I'm gonna, Doug's gonna talk through each of these screenshots, and then I'll just go on to him from there. So I start here, Doug, and then you just tell me when to go on to the next thing.
Yeah, well, okay. So what we're using the Claris Customer Console web interface to be able to get you to connect your FileMaker server to your FileMaker Remote Backup service. So if you've never used basically the CCC, you need to actually have a Claris ID. So we use Claris ID for Studio, for Connect, for FileMaker Cloud, and this is feature in order to actually sort of get the system to work for you. This is what we're going to use. So in order to actually have the account set up, the Claris ID needs to be the one of the license to email address that we use for the contract. So the person who actually set up the FileMaker contract is the one that's going to have their account linked to the remote backup service. So once you've actually got that set up, you log into the CCC. When you click on remote backup, so if you move to the next slide, you're basically going to have this menu. So the way we're doing it is we are linking and we're using the server ID from your server to the FileMaker Remote Backup service to make sure that we can link those two environments so that the data flow can actually be done properly. There's a couple of steps. Once it's actually on market, we'll give you sort of more information. But essentially, is you'll be given on entry level 5 gig, and then you can purchase an extra 100 gig or more on top of that, and then you can set up the size of the drive. And the one technology that we're using is on the backup or the remote backup side of it. We're using AWS, so the S3 sort of system. And then on the FileMaker, to be able to actually get the system to work quickly, is we're using a snapshot system. So in FileMaker Server, you have the option to be able to do progressive backups. So instead of actually saving every time the whole FileMaker file, when you do it in a backup, it is just saving the blocks of data that have actually changed. And then we just send that information. So let's say you have 10 files on your server that makes up 50 gig. When we're doing the remote backup, we only basically moving the data block changes and rebuilding the file within AWS. We're not sending everything. We're not sending 50 gig of data every time. Otherwise, it would be really, really slow. And it's a system that we use basically inside the FileMaker Cloud. So the whole principle behind it is to give you a perfectly or as close as a perfect backup on the internet as we can sort of give you. So behind the philosophy of what we call 3-2-1 inside a backup system is you have 3 versions of your file, 1 locally and 2 backup. The idea is to give you this really good backup. We use the AWS system that we have in cloud. So if you're based in the US, depending on your states, you'll either be on the east or the west side. In Europe, you'll be either in Ireland or in Frankfurt. For those in Japan and Asia, will be Japan one, and then the one that we have in Australia. And then for the Kingdom customers, will be in that country. This is a V1, so essentially is because we control properly FileMaker Cloud and we know how it works, and we really understand really well security around S3, we want to use just that. Maybe in the future, we'll see whether we can actually give you the access to other providers. But the one thing which is really important is because we have to make sure that the data has been actually sent properly from your server to the remote backup, and we can validate that it's there, and we can know that we can rebuild the file if there's an issue, is done in environment that we control. And we control FileMaker Cloud. We have great security from FileMaker Cloud, so we know how that works. So this is kind of why we're doing this way as a V1. In the future, when we maybe have more feedback from users and we know that we can trust from other providers, like whether it's Bug, Dropbox, or whatever. We'll see whether there's anything we can do that way. But initially, it will just be on AWS in environment that we control. Again, it is all the stuff that we have. So licensing, I can see there's a few questions around it. It is a annual contract. So if you have an annual contract that you've paid for, if you have a perpetual license with maintenance, you'll be able to actually get to that. On the SBA and site license, currently we won't be offering as of on the V1, but we are working to be able to actually sort of create one. Again, the SBA, it's about management of the account, stuff like that, and it does really work that well for you. So we want to stay away from that. Site license, we can try to actually sort of work around it, but the product engineering team actually building something that we want to make sure works for everyone every time. Actually, sort of want to be able to use it.
So Doug, we sort of walked through how you instantiate the drive through the CCC, how you can name the drive and allocate a portion, because you don't have to. It's not a all or nothing. You can divide it up, and so we've done that now. It's sitting there in the CCC, and now it's time to bind it into FileMaker Server, and so we'll start going into there.
So in the cloud, so basically on your so this is the FileMaker Server. Once you've actually have a right contract, so the cloud backup, which actually is now being renamed something, it will be probably called remote backup, that will actually be coming up if you have the right license key. So if you have a license that allows you to actually have it, you'll see the tab. If your license doesn't allow it, you won't be able to actually sort of see it. And then when you click on it, you will get to the management page of it. So I think if you go to the next slide, so this is basically what we have. So for those who've actually seen FileMaker Cloud, the left-hand side is actually very similar. We've changed some of the names, but basically the idea is to be very, very similar. So it gives you different options. One other thing which is kind of useful is the hosted file. So once you've actually registered and then you've got the storage linked from your server to the remote backup, then the flow of data actually sort of keeps on working. And then when you're doing your backups, those are actually done every 20 minutes. So it is a snapshot system. It is not a full backup. It is really a snapshot environment. And then once you've got the storage registered with your FileMaker remote backup service, then actually keep on working. I think if you move to the next slide, so this one before, actually you can go to the next last one.
That one.
So you're basically using keys. So it's similar to any type of API services. You have a client key, client ID. You have a client secret key. We call them storage ID and storage key. It basically creates the secure environment between your server and then the remote service. Once enabled, then everything is actually locked into security system. I think the last slide should show you.
Yeah, just let me just call this out, Doug. So here you're in the CCC. You've set that up like we showed previously. You'll notice here those two things that the server is asking for are here. You can click on this affordance and it'll copy it, and then you just paste it there. And that's how you make the connection between what your license allows. And as Doug said, if you're eligible to use your license type is eligible to use remote backup, it'll show up in the CCC. If not, we won't even bother you with it. But then you marry these two things together, and then once you do that, boom, your cloud storage is registered, and it then appears in lists. You can see I've got multiple cloud ones here. The reason that the three are red is that, well, I can have multiple drives. I can only attach one remote drive to a FileMaker server, but I can also swap those out. And then Doug, this is the you want to pick up here, but this is now we're back in the CCC, because once you said server, I want you to use that backup drive, it's still the CCC that's going to make that final connection. So you want to pick it up from here, Doug?
Yeah. So this one is basically you do the approval on FileMaker Server, and then you have to do the approval on the remote backup. So the remote backup goes, I'm allowing that server that has sent me this information to really be able to actually sort of start doing the flow of the backup. And once you click on approve server, Then it's going to do a bit of work to figure out how much needs to be sent. And then the first initial, I would say, backup is going to be quite long because it's going to take the first backup and copy all of that. And then after 20 minutes, it will be basically the just incremental updates that you have in your system. So if you have large files, then obviously at first it's going to be quite long, but then actually the system should be quite good.
Yeah, think of it this way. Sorry, Doug. Think of it this way. So with your Claire's customer console, you're instantiating a remote drive, but it doesn't know what server it's going to go to. Then you go to a particular server in the FAC and you say, that drive I want to be associated with this server. Then once the server says, I want to use this drive, it's still the CCC that controls it. So you come back there and say, yes, I approve this server. Right? So it's not happening all automatically behind the scenes. And the reason is you can slice and dice the allocation you have, and you can have multiple servers there. And so it's a back and forth, but I've done this many times. Super straightforward once you get to it. And yeah, and then now you can see, for instance, I could go in there and say, no, I want to turn this one on, right? It's disconnected, but I want to connect it. And
yeah, so in terms of the site, so once you have the right contract, you can subscribe to it. So the initial subscription will be for 5 gig, and then you will be able to buy it by bunches of 100 gig at a time on an annual contract. So if you want to buy for 1 terabyte of backup because that's what you need, then you can actually sort of do that. The one thing which is really important is because we're using same technology as FileMaker Cloud, everything has to be encrypted. So before you actually start the process, you need to make sure that your FileMaker file on your FileMaker servers have all been encrypted using either the developer tool or developer utilities. Otherwise, it won't actually work. So you'll probably have to do some work ahead of that to take down your server, encrypt all the files properly, and actually put them back on the server to make sure everything actually works properly. So there's a lot of stuff to make sure that do stuff, but when it goes out, we'll do some other webinars and some extra information to make sure everyone can start using it.
So let me say this. Our intent is that this is part of the disaster recovery, business continuity, larger set of features that will be coming in FileMaker 2026. And if you hadn't heard already, we're skipping a couple of releases. We're aligning the actual year with the version number, so we no longer have to remember, oh, 22 is 25, that kind of thing. So the next major release that will come out is FileMaker 2026. Our intent is, and it may look a little bit different as we refine this, that not only remote backup, but some other things that we'll talk about in the future that are also related to this concept. If something goes wrong, how can I recover? I have heard, as long as I've been at FileMaker, someone who has an issue, they go back to a backup if they have a backup, right? Because sometimes they don't and they have a corrupt file, and sometimes we can fix it and sometimes we can't. But if they have gone to the trouble of having backups, to only find out that the backup that they had is also corrupted and they didn't keep enough. And so that's why that advice of making sure you're doing verification on your backup so that you know that they're good. It also helps you catch something, because a lot of times corruption can be in a file that's not so apparent until maybe the server goes down and goes back up, and sometimes it's the weirdest thing, like some object on a layout that causes this corruption. And we probably have more questions, Rosemary, as well.
Yep. So I think as we were going through, Rick and Doug, you answered most of the questions. Just to reiterate, there's a question about, does this work with encrypted files?
It only works with encrypted file.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other question is, does that also require container data be stored encrypted?
So once you have a file that's been encrypted, you can only have it as encrypted data. So you won't be able to use open storage because it basically secures everything. It moves everything into a different folder called secure. So everything will be in the secure folder. For the backup system, it's the whole system. So it's FileMaker files and containers. So everything goes together, which some people will say, well, it's going to use too much storage space, but then the containers are in a lot of cases more vital than actually the structure of your FileMaker systems. So you don't want to lose them. So doing a backup strategy where you're not using it because it's too much space is going to create issues. So fair enough, if you have a huge amount of data, it might be a bit more, but the price of the storage is vaguely the same that we have for the cloud. So it's actually not that much. It's basically on par with how much you would pay for putting your stuff on box and stuff like that. So I strongly would encourage people to actually look at it going is if there's a bit of a cost for your customer or for yourself, there is a reason why basically you have to pay for that.
It may be a good time to talk about, the span of options between FileMaker Cloud, where remote backup is already part of it, to this remote backup, to a lot of people who essentially are cloud-based, but going through a third-party partner as well. And it just fits in that spectrum. So depending upon who you are, what kind of an organization and a lot of the larger deployments may already have a solution that they're doing and they're happy with it, and maybe they would take advantage of it. But there's a lot of people that aren't doing this best practice, and then maybe they're a small shop or something like that, or it's business critical to them, and it gives them a really straightforward way to get themselves some security.
Yeah, so we created this new page. I'm just going to share it for those who haven't actually sort of seen it yet. What's my supply? So we created a new FileMaker, Claris FileMaker hosting option page. So you can find it from any page within the Claris website. All the way at the bottom, you've got hosting options. And the way we've actually sort of done it is to really sort of make sure everyone knows all the options that you have. So we know that it's vital for your data to be safe. And so the idea is to go, this is basically the various options that you have to actually have a proper system. Peer-to-peer sharing is nice for testing purposes, but if you have any issues, it's not going to basically save you in the long term. So ideally is those are the three stuff you should be sort of looking at. So either you want to do FileMaker Cloud, because you want everything to be managed by us, and you want something that is really straightforward. You can do the hosting yourself for any cases, or if you're basically looking for third-party hosting. And we have some really good third-party hosting partners globally. If you don't know the closest one to where you live, I would suggest you can actually call our support team or our sales team, and they'll be able to actually sort of give you access directly to those partners. They offer great services. And in other cases, sometimes you might not want to use our FileMaker Cloud because we don't actually support plugins in FileMaker Cloud. But you might actually definitely need a plugin, whether it's something like Monkey Bread or whatever plugin. And in some cases, you want to use a third party, they'll give you all the options. So you have this table to give you all the advantage of the three different options. The base that we think of either of them, so whether it's cloud, FileMaker Server, or third party. And then we have a quick link somewhere, I can't remember where it is. But this is all the information that you have. So we really want to get people that are not using server properly to actually sort of have a look at it and go, well, I need to actually sort of do all that properly. If you need help, again, you can talk to an expert. We can put chat with one of our great Claris partners globally to give you some extra information on how to actually have a proper system.
All right, and we have about 5 minutes left. So first, before you leave, if you need to dash off to your next meeting, please do answer our closing questions. We're trying to gather some information that we'll share back with the product team around, when you're planning to upgrade to FileMaker 2025, if you haven't already, and also let us know what you need from Claris, or what prevents you from adopting server and pro updates as soon as they're available. So if there are other things that Claris can do to help you speed that adoption, please let us know, and we'll take it back to the product management and engineering teams. Just also want to call out, I saw Taylor Sharp in the audience, so I want to call out the FM Plug meeting that the Dallas group is hosting tomorrow. Clay Makel from Claris, our FileMaker architect, will be joining them in person to do an even deeper dive on what's new in these two recent FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server releases. So if you want to get a little more technical and dive a little deeper, please join them either in person if it's convenient and you can get there, or remote. And the link is on their page. And also, we have another community live next week. I'll be joined by Louie and Yi Chen from Claris and Mike Wallace from Empowered Data Solutions. And we'll be doing an introduction and discussion about the new Claris MCP for FileMaker. So if you haven't seen that, this is a chance for you to learn a little bit about what MCP is and how you can configure it and get started using it, and some use cases and real examples of what it can do. And
Be a good one.
yeah, and I'm not seeing any questions that we haven't answered. I think the only one is, you know, how to get remote backup for SBA partners. And I think that might be a conversation best taken offline with the partner team, would be my recommendation.
Yeah, we're well aware of the desire for SBAs for not only something like remote backup, but things like Claris Studio and Claris Connect. And so we are behind the scenes working at how to enable that, because the SBAs are important partners for ours. You guys sell a lot of product for us, and it behooves us to make this stuff work if you guys want it. So believe it's not lost on us. It's just much more complicated.
So you have about 30 seconds to get last questions in if you want. Otherwise, I will end the meeting. And I just want to close by saying, if there are topics you'd like to see on a future Claris Community Live, please reach out to me or Martha, or just make a post somewhere in the Claris community. Let us know what you're interested in hearing about, and we will try to find the right person to present it. Or if you have a story you'd like to share, we're also always happy to hear those. So thanks everyone for joining us. Once again, Happy New Year, and I hope we see you next week. Bye.